The opinions you hear on Your Mountain from individual hosts or guests do not necessarily represent those of Your Mountain, our sponsors, or other entities we're affiliated with professionally or otherwise. You've waited long enough. Go listen to the show.
There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is Your Mountain. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Your Mountain podcast. I'm your host David Wilms, hosting actually not just the podcast, but my co-hosts. I'm hosting them in my house.
Yeah, did your wife make you live outside now?
This is technically part of my house.
Yeah.
I paid a lot of money to make this part of my house.
But Nephi phrased that in a way that makes it sound like that's a new thing.
Oh.
Yeah, fair enough.
I was just saying, I felt bad for you. Like, I got here and she's got you like living on the back porch out here in the back.
I don't think you should feel bad for this.
They won't even let you turn on the fireplace. I'm freezing.
So I want to be clear in case she's listening.
Oh.
She's not even here. She's out of town visiting friends. I just have 3 kids sleeping in the house. And, three kids sleeping in the house. And we're going to use the sunroom because it's fully enclosed and
there's no sun,
is less likely to wake people up. And I will say this to everybody listening right now, because I'm solo parenting right now and we're trying to record this here. I also have a baby monitor in this room because I got a young toddler who might wake up and I might have to leave for a little bit. I also have a 4-month-old puppy who may have to go potty, and so I may have to leave to take him out.
Well, I got to tell you,
this show's going organic today. We'll see what happens.
I was really weirded out.
Daddy daycare.
Yeah. Exactly. So I appreciate you guys coming here because there's no way I was getting out of the house today.
I was really weirded out when I was like, hey, I could use, I left a pen at the house. I need something to write with. And you literally handed me a green crayon, which makes me wonder, is this what you're using for work?
I have crayons everywhere.
This is like,
But you can tell this sunroom doesn't get blisteringly hot because I don't know how long it's been in here and it has perfect form. It clearly hasn't melted at all. We call it a sunroom, but typically you would build a sunroom on a south-facing.
It has Tinkerbell on it. I don't know if you knew that when you handed it to me. If you're really,
this is my west-facing sunroom.
It's an enclosed porch. It's awesome.
It is.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Dave.
Well, I don't know that you do. You made fun of it and kind of hurt my feelings.
Well, I'm sorry.
It's better than your enclosed porch.
That's right.
It's better than my enclosed porch.
That's right.
This is a 12-month porch right here.
Hey, Dave, I like it.
Thank you.
You know, the only thing that could make it better, if you had a hilarious story, like you said, like when I was building this, the guy building like fell through the roof into the kitchen.
Funny you should say that. Has anybody out there had a guy fall through their roof and land on their kitchen floor while they're holding a baby? Not the guy that fell through. That happened. I had at the time. Yeah, we were building this thing, and I was having this two-way fireplace here that you see.
The new fireplace.
The new fireplace.
Sure wish it was on. It's so cold.
because the old one didn't work because they didn't.
Yeah, that's another story in itself. I was so mad. It's worth telling. I was so mad about that. So I had a two-way fireplace in here before, and I hired a contractor to enclose this. And I'm not going to name names, but I don't know anything about fireplaces. I just assumed when he enclosed it that when I turned it on, it would work. And it did. It worked just fine, except it exhausted from the fireplace. It didn't go out the roof. So it just, filled this room with death. Yeah. So I had to put in a new fireplace and have it vent out the roof. And so they were putting in the vent on the roof, and they went through my attic. And I watched the guy go up the ladder, and he had both hands full. I'm like, aren't you going to want to hold on to something while you're walking across my attic? And I'm holding on to my kid. I'm sitting in my office, which is right by my kitchen, and I hear him go up and then just like all of a sudden I see a leg come through, and then the whole body comes through, and he bounces off my tile floor, and I watch his head whip back and hit the floor, and now I've got this guy on the floor that's unconscious, and it's raining down insulation from up above.
Didn't he crack the tile?
He did. I had to. Well, I don't think it was his skull. I think it was the tools he had in his hand.
Yeah,
cracked the tile.
That's not a short ceiling in there.
No, that was a
vaulted
9-foot
ceilings.
fall. That was a 9-foot fall.
Yeah.
No, it might have been more than
vaulted.
that. That's vaulted.
vaulted, yeah.
That was more like a 10-foot fall. And I mean, it was clean. He didn't catch in it because he didn't have a hand free. So, and that's the other thing I was wondering when this was happening. Like, okay, you're going through. Wouldn't you like drop what's in your hands and just try and grab onto something? But he landed, and he had tools in both hands when he hit the ground. Like, he's laying there unconscious and holding 2 tools. I'm like, well,
Gonna have to walk those back up.
Murphy has a law, and I believe Newton had a theory. And,
Oh, man.
Anyway,
And this guy didn't have a job.
and this guy was out of a job by the next morning. Once he got the medical clearance,
yeah.
then he was out of a job, and then
Well,
the
I
guy
hope you're
putting
proud of yourself.
all of a sudden the guy installing a fireplace had to do a whole lot of other things too. So yeah, there's the story on this sunroom and this fireplace, which I haven't turned on.
Yeah. Not like I knew that it was going to go there when I started picking on your sunroom, but what a great story.
Actually, I think I was on a call at the time with somebody at work, and it happened, and I'm like, gotta go, hung up, and just left it like that. And I probably said something much more colorful than that, like when you see somebody fall through your ceiling. Right? Anyway, the guy was fine. He had a concussion and no broken bones or anything. The worst thing that happened to him was he lost his job because it turned out to cost them a lot of money to fix everything up.
Well, yeah, and if some people walk on the rafter, the wood.
I've heard of that as being a way to do that.
Some people don't.
Yeah, and his boss told me this wasn't the first incident they'd had with this guy.
So it wasn't like any Karate Kid skill building going on. It was just...
No, it was a Sawzall and a drill. They were just up there to cut a hole. And, I don't. Anyway, it's a story.
It looks
to tell.
nice now.
Yeah.
I gotta say.
Thank you.
Well done.
But that's not what we're here to
Nice
talk about
recovery.
today, right?
So the fire looks good.
This fire looks good, right? This fireplace looks good.
At least if it was on. I'm still so cold.
But what we're talking about are other fires.
Oh, yeah.
In case you haven't noticed, most of the western United States is on fire right now.
Not the sky's not falling.
It was yesterday. Raining ash.
That was ash, yeah.
We had a lot of ash here yesterday.
It was ridiculous. I went hunting yesterday morning. You tried to send me poaching. I appreciate that. Duck season's not open in that zone for another week. But that's okay.
I didn't say which zone.
Because I didn't
I
go.
did tell you needed to look. I said, I don't know if it's open there.
Because I
told you
decided
that.
to go chase Sharpies instead. But that's okay.
Don't throw me under the bus. I told you
I was
on our
worried.
call. I said,
I thought they were
make
gonna-
sure you check because I don't
I
know
thought
if it's
they were
open
going to
there.
erase my 5-year-old. I thought, like, oh my gosh, what's this going to do to his future? The wardens were going to come and take Grant away. It's just
So what types of ducks did you get?
nothing. Nothing.
Really?
We,
No,
we
seriously,
didn't-
what kind of get? No, nobody's listening.
No, we
Yeah,
really
you
thought
can tell
about
us.
shooting
Yeah, right.
some pigeons.
Speaking to my microphone. I mean, my lapel pin.
No, it was anyway. But yeah, like we got up early, drove out of town, and it was kind of foggy looking. But then we were coming back into Cheyenne, literally 20 miles outside of town. It just, I did not want to come home anymore. And it was the afternoon. It was so
It was awful.
literally ugly that I felt like I was driving into.
Yeah, I played an 18-hole fundraiser golf tournament.
Oh my gosh!
I just tried to keep my
It was
kids in the house.
Awful.
Yeah,
I mean, it was. I didn't want to go outside.
it was literally orange outside.
I called it peach, but orange is good too. Yeah, it was crazy. You couldn't see the sun until right around sunset. The wind shifted and it blew some of the smoke out, and you could see the sunset. But all day,
You know what really stuck out to me, and I don't know if you've noticed this, is like how the fluorescent lights or the LED lighting all was on, and how the stuff that's in the atmosphere absorbs certain wavelengths and then highlights others. It was just eerie. It was crazy.
Yeah.
yeah, it was unbelievable. Yeah, and all the lights, street lights, and everything came on about
Everything's on.
noon.
Yeah, so
You know?
we're talking about the Mullen Fire over
Yep.
west of us, and it went from, I don't know, like
it went from 30,000 acres at the beginning of the day to 80,000 acres at the end.
Well, it's not quite to 80,000. It's
pretty
so
dang close.
it went from 18,000 just a few days ago over the course of a weekend, and now it's up to 78,000. I think is the last check today.
Like
I don't want to round up.
But yesterday,
80.
yesterday it was at 69,000.
Yeah.
It was when I went to sleep last night. It was already.
No, the
bumped
governor
over
was
70.
wrong about that.
Well,
I know
don't
where you
care
got
what
your
the governor
information.
No, he estimated it, and then they did the official light.
Yeah, and it turned out to be under 70 last night, which is still it's
I didn't have
splitting
anything
hairs.
to write except this
It's
green
splitting hairs,
crayon.
though.
What was
huge.
amazing is that we were talking about this Friday evening, and like at 5 o'clock, it was like, oh my goodness, it hit 20,000 acres, and then while we were playing a game, it was 25,000, and by the time we left playing the game, it was like 32,000. It was just
65 mile an hour winds,
and the next day it doubled.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to talk about, and we had some people reach out in the past several weeks asking for us to cover forest management, fires, because of the fire season, and I guess it just took it hitting really close to home for us to say, you know what, that would be a good topic.
Well, let me say this. As hard as it was when you were a Boy Scout to try and get that stupid fire started, it's a lot easier than people think. And a lot of people aren't as careful as they should.
And we're going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to talk about that.
But yeah, I think a lot of people, people have asked questions. It's like, so when people say, why these fires now? Like, what's different? So what are the things that they say?
Well, can we first dispel some of the myths that are out there?
Yeah.
There's some really just absolutely asinine conspiracy theories floating around out there.
I don't know if I want you to destroy them because some of them are so good. Go ahead, though.
Good as in just
don't worry.
kind of funny.
Wait around, there'll be another.
Oh, good.
Okay, so some of them are that members of Antifa are
driving
around intentionally lighting fires that have turned into huge fires.
Now wait.
Oh, don't do this.
People started them, right?
Here's the thing that you need to remember. And here's what we talked about this last time. Here's what makes Here's what makes all these things work. Is because in some cases there may have been one instance where something like this happens, as though somebody takes that and says like, "Oh well, I caught a fish in that lake, so therefore that entire lake is full of fish." Well, that's not true.
Yeah, and I think that's a good example because I remember seeing a news report about one guy right on the interstate outside of Portland, I think, who was had made a Molotov cocktail or whatever
started a fire,
started a grass fire.
See, all these fires were started by that guy with a Molotov cocktail.
You're describing an urban legend,
which was quashed right away. I mean, that fire was put out right away.
Doesn't look like it to me,
but that happened, and then the rumor spread, and now it's like this giant conspiracy to go start fires.
It's like a forest fire. It spread like a forest fire.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, right. Spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
The fact is, in the Northwest this year, especially in Northern California and into Oregon and Washington, those big mega fires that you see, not all of them, and we'll talk about that, but actually a lot of them this year were caused by lightning, big lightning storms. And we'll talk about some of the other stuff when we get closer. There were other fires that were not.
I do want you to know that the frequency and duration of large storms has gone down since 2005. I just want to say that.
But the amount of lightning and storms has gone up.
It's very interesting.
And that was actually done over the past 20 years or so. It's actually gone up. Occurrences of lightning in some of these storms, in most of these storms, the frequency of lightning. So I found that interesting. So
the frequency of the storms and their severity has gone down, but the instances of lightning has gone up.
In the individual storms has gone up.
I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah,
less storms.
Somebody
more
has too much
lightning
time.
per storm.
Yeah,
that's what I just heard. Yeah. Those two things can coexist.
They can, right?
But
that's that kind of what drove us to want to talk about some of this. So, but I wanted to be able to dispel with that was probably the biggest
myth number one.
That's myth number one. That
was a good one, though.
Do you have any other myths?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is. All of this is due to climate change.
Right.
And so, like this
partial truth.
This never would have happened. It's because of climate change.
So he had an urban legend. Are you saying you now have an urban legend?
What I'm saying is it's not all. You can't attribute it all to climate change. I'm saying climate change has an impact, some sort of effect, and we can talk about that.
You mean just like an individual throwing a Molotov cocktail could, in some instances, be responsible? That sometimes changes in climate or precipitation patterns could impact fire.
We'll talk about it.
Keep going.
Because here's the thing. No, I mean, I think this is important because I think, first of all, it's important to say this, that for 4.6 billion years, the climate of this planet has been changing. And it's going to continue to do that. And so there needs to be a gut check, number one, that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. And number two, that, you know, that these changes will continue to occur. And I think that's enough said. And then all we need to say is we need to learn and work and mitigate changes that we see as consequential. And that doesn't mean you're going to stop them, but it means you should think about them.
We'll talk more about it later.
All right.
I've got some thoughts too.
All right. Well, I'm going to throw this crayon at you if I don't like those thoughts. That's what I've been doing since kindergarten.
You might not. We'll mostly agree, I think. We'll mostly agree.
Okay. If it hits you in the eye, I'm really sorry.
But I don't want to. If you're saying it's a myth that climate change has contributed to fire frequency, I'm going to say that's not a myth. I'm going to disagree with you on that. I don't think it's the sole contributor.
You think there's an impact?
I think there's an impact. I think it's a contributor. It's not the contributor.
It sure don't help.
Yeah, I like Mike's answer much better than yours, Dave.
Keep going.
It's basically
much
summarized
simpler.
mine.
Yeah, you're just too attorney-like. You want to make it difficult. Just say like, hey.
Mike's always more attorney-like than I am.
I guess not tonight.
Man, you're wearing this Broncos jersey. I'm afraid that you're just...
I've had a bad day. No, I'm going to take it out on you.
And Mike here was, is a fan of the opposing team, and so he's had a good day.
I was born and raised in that area, but it doesn't mean I ever rooted for them.
You're just saying,
except for the Super Bowl year.
Yeah, that you're a huge fan. And I'm assuming you're a fan that Tom Brady's there.
How
too.
was that win? Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah. Okay. So, that one time. They might win again. I don't know.
No, I meant the Super Bowl.
I know that's what you meant.
Yeah.
I'm saying this year they look good. They might win again. I don't know. Broncos aren't going anywhere.
That's true.
Okay. Any other? We might come up with more that we want.
It has nothing to do with precipitation patterns or climate or people. It is forestry management. That is why this is happening. If people would have just done a little bit of management, we would not have had these fires.
Or the opposite of overlogged.
I think that's a contributor too. I still don't think that's. So I think climate change is a contributor. I think forest mismanagement is a contributor.
And Antifa is a contributor.
I also think there are other contributors to this as well.
There are.
And
but you could. I mean, I've heard it said, too much logging, too little logging.
Yes. And that's exactly what I'm saying with everything. So I think it's a mistake for you to be like, we're going to just say none of these things are factors. No. What we need to realize is that in some level, most of these things are factors. That is why people can make arguments about this and feel good about their argument and think that they be like, I am right.
I see what you're doing there.
I am a narcissist and I know everything because they know just enough to believe that they have the answer, but the answer is bigger than one thing.
So you were given the third myth. I missed where you're going there. You were saying forest mismanagement is the third myth, that's the sole cause. That's the third myth. Another myth.
Do you need a crayon?
No, I was just making sure we're clear there. That's
okay.
Did you now? So Nephi, I
can use some other colors.
Did you have any? Because you're clearly polished up from your Flat Earth Society meeting you just left. So do you have any other? Did you have any other myths?
Let me think of some other ones. Let's see. Nope.
Okay.
Do guns cause forest fires?
Yes. No.
Do
projectiles do?
No, guns do not cause forest fires.
I've seen the movies. That's not how that works.
Yeah.
Yeah, you always throw something out there, shoot it, and it blows up.
Yeah.
I don't.
Cause and effect.
Maybe you do. Maybe you're responsible. In fact, I'm not the type of guy that would go to a campground with a bunch of drunk hooligans and like shoot propane bottles with like, I'm not that type of guy. I don't know if anybody else at this table is that type of guy. Dave.
I'm not aware of that. I am aware of going and recreationally shooting, not in campgrounds, mostly safely.
Yeah. I mean, some people are stupid, but yeah.
No, I'm just saying, like, and that's the issue. I think that all of us, I mean, you asked a thing, and again, this is so here's what needs to be said. People who recreationally shoot giant things of tannerite on the side of like a, grass hill, can that cause a fire? Yep. Has it in the past? Yep. How about people going out, how about people putting on their sandals and their coffee cups and hiking to the backcountry with their Birkenstocks on and deciding that they're going to build a campfire and hang out and make s'mores and then not putting their campfire out and then going back to their Prius and driving away. Have those people cause fires? Yep.
No, you're getting way ahead of us now.
Oh, okay.
Like you're getting like
I'm just saying
3/4 of the way through the podcast ahead of us now.
All right.
We'll
back
We'll
up.
take on the hippies later.
Yeah.
All
right. Okay. So myths out of the way.
Okay.
If we come up with any others, we'll bring them up. Let's talk a little bit about the history of forest management. First of all, forest management in the country, because one of the things you touched on that you mentioned is sort of the myth that forest mismanagement is the sole cause of these fires, right? But it's a contributing factor, and I want to talk about that, like what the country looked like and how we wound up with the management regime we have, like what led us down this path to how we manage forests today.
You're not going to read your entire law review article, are you?
It's a reference material.
Okay, I just appreciate it if you could give us the Cliff Notes version. Like I'm holding a crayon. That's the version I want.
I'm going to give it mostly Cliff Noted, but there's some important details that I think we have to talk about.
Okay.
To really understand this.
Can I draw trees while we're talking?
You do whatever you want.
All right.
We'll come back to you. Maybe. Okay, once you've calmed down. All right. You ready?
Do you have any more pretzels?
No, I put those away. So now you're all amped up again. Nobody wants to listen to us chew on this thing. So you had some good pretzels, right? Before we started. All right. Let's talk about this. So before start early in our nation's history, right? Deforestation is an issue all over the globe, right? It's a huge deal all over the globe. We're losing forests all over the place. In this country, deforestation on large scale started pretty early on. It actually started, in the eastern United States. Most of the eastern United States after European settlement was logged. All the Appalachian states, right? The Great Lakes region, the Ozarks, deforestation was rampant there.
Why?
Cultivated agriculture was one of the biggest things, right? And then it was sort of three things, right? There was one, cutting down areas to grow stuff.
Yep.
2, cutting down forests to build stuff.
Yep.
And 3, cutting down forests to heat stuff.
Yep.
That's maybe there are other buckets, but I think those are probably the 3 big buckets. I think you got it
pretty good, but I think it's important to touch on that when I think the human aspect we cannot lose, and when we talk about these things, the issue of why. It's not enough to just say, well, people did this. It's like, well, why did they do it? Well, understand that they did it because they had to build a cabin. They did it because they had to feed their kids. They did it because they had to keep them from freezing. And so, understand these things when you talk about it. And it's just a note for people that we have these conversations to make sure we understand the human impacts.
Right. And so then European settlers start moving west and they hit the trees, in the Rockies, and they start doing the same thing in the west.
They start a place with, frankly, less trees.
Same needs.
Yeah. Right. Fewer trees and trees that grow a lot slower.
Yeah.
But with the same, with the same needs, right? And an additional need of building the transportation infrastructure, the rail infrastructure, which I failed to mention, but that was a big part of
tie hacks.
Tie hacks. There was a lot of deforestation that went on with building the railroad and communities along the railroad.
Yep.
So that was a big deal. It was so bad, in fact, that in 1891, Congress passed the Forest Reserve Act. And so the Forest Reserve Act authorized the president to create public forest reserves. President Harrison was the president at the time, and he immediately established about 13 million acres of timberland in western states under this Forest Reserve Act, reserved these forests. And fast forward a few years, and Congress then enacted the Organic Administration Act, which appropriated funds for forest management and declared that forest reserves should be managed, quote, to improve and protect the forest within the boundaries or for the purpose of securing a continuous supply of timber. And it morphed from there even more with Teddy Roosevelt and the establishment of the National Forest System and putting Gifford Pinchot in place as the director of the Forest Service. The idea was we can't lose these forests. We can't just log to depletion. So the idea around this federal involvement was to say we need to manage for a renewable resource. We need to have these timber reserves here to meet our economic needs. And remember, we're in the late 1800s, early 1900s. This timber was incredibly important for heating homes. It was important for building homes. I mean, it was important for society. Like you mentioned, you have to look back in time. The way oil is so critical today for everything we do in our world.
Timber
was that, right? Timber was that for a while. Just like whale blubber was that for a while. We kind of go through these cycles of things.
It's still an important commodity today.
100%.
No doubt.
Big time. Big time.
Somebody falls through your ceiling, you need some 2x4s?
It fell right through between the 2x4s. So, they're on what, 16-inch centers or something like that?
18s.
18s, yeah. So he made himself skinny. Fell through there. Yeah. Here's one thing that happened. So there are two big events that I think are worth talking about how we went from, so we're managing these forests for the commodity to have this renewable resource. But a couple of things happened in the first half of the 20th century that really set us on our course for how we manage forests today, or how we're trying to get away from managing forests, but how we had managed forests for so long. One of them took place in 1910. So in 1910, it was the driest year anybody had ever seen. Right? Funny, drought will come up more in these discussions, right? Driest year you've ever seen, that people had ever seen, and you had a combination of lightning strikes, intentional fires, accidental fires that created this complex that basically burned northern Idaho and western Montana. The fires were so enormous that they were dumping ash on Greenland, on glaciers in Greenland. They were so enormous that navigators in the Atlantic couldn't see the stars at night. The smoke was so thick off the coast, 500 miles off the coast of the United States, that couldn't see the stars at night to navigate. The people were dying. Burned communities, killed dozens of people.
Are you saying it was worse than it is today?
No, I'm not.
Oh, I was hoping you were, because I wanted to.
No.
Because I wanted to say, it's possible these things are cyclical and that they happen?
Yeah, I know that's what you want to say.
But they are, and it does.
I know that's what you want to say.
Well, they are, and it does.
Fair enough. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Anyway, these huge fires in 1910. There's an amazing story around these fires in 1910. There's this guy that's leading and I wish I could remember his name. I'm drawing a blank. Maybe it'll come to me. But he's leading this group of men fighting these fires in northern Idaho. And winds come up. One of the things about these fires is they had hurricane force winds sustained over days that caused fires to just sweep across landscapes. And he got caught in this with his group. And west of, or was near, I think the town was Wallace, Idaho. You know where Wallace is?
No.
Okay, me either. I was just asking, since you lived there for like a couple of years. Anyway, fire sweeps through. This is an amazing story. He finds this mine shaft, gets into the mine shaft with these 45 guys, and they put like wet blankets and stuff over the mouth of the mine shaft. And this leader stands at the mouth of the mine shaft and holds all of his all these firefighters basically hostage at gunpoint. It's like, you're not going out there. You're going to die if you go out there. I think he had 46 people with him, something like that. And after several days go by, they emerge, right? They all pass out, and then the smoke clears, and they come to, and several of the firefighters see this guy at the mouth of the thing, laying down, and they're like, oh, he died. And he made some comment like, not today, fellas, or something like that, like the most manly thing you could possibly imagine. And they, like, 5 of the 46 died, something like that. Everybody else survived in this, as this, hurricane force wind, and these fires were whipping through. But anyway, so they survived, and that was just a crazy story. And then this guy leads the charge on, okay, this can't happen again, right? Like this massive multi-million acre fire complex that I think the estimated total number of fires in this complex was somewhere between 1,700 and 3,500 individual fires started by various means. He's like, yeah, that sucked. That cannot happen again. And
How many have we had this year? Do you know?
I don't know the answer to that. But he makes this push. He makes this push and says, we need to adopt a policy. And it's like the 10 a.m. policy. I think it's what it's called, right? And so that policy is that any new fire needs to be suppressed by 10 a.m. the next day. And that became the MO, right, for the Forest Service. After that was complete suppression, like attack and suppress. That was the MO for, well, it's been the MO, right? The other thing that happened, so one of the consequences of attack and suppress is that you kind of alter the natural fire regimes of these forests. Right? A lot of these forests, like ponderosa pine forests, for example, you might have these 200, 400-year-old trees that are 6 feet across, and fires might burn through there. I remember once in college, they might burn through every few years. I worked in a paleoecology lab in college for a while, and we carbon dated squirrel middens to see kind of when did ponderosa pine, to find out when ponderosa pine made their entrance into the state. Right? I mean, one of the things we also did was look at ponderosa pines, take core samples and check fire history, tree ring fire history. And these trees were going through fires anywhere from every 2 to 10 years, right? Because the fires were coming in and burning off all the understory, and the trees were so big that none of these low fires could get to any low-hanging branches to get into the canopy. Mm-hmm. So just clearing out the underbrush and keeping these nice forests. Well, fire suppression tactics meant all that understory stuff could grow up bigger and denser, and then carry fuels when fires come through, carry fuels to the canopy, and now they can jump and kill entire forests. Right? Mm-hmm. One example. But there are I've seen papers on this, estimates that since the 1880s, since we kind of early 1900s, since we've really started suppressing fires hard, that the biomass in some of these forests or the density, like there are anywhere from 200 to 600% more trees in these places than there historically were, which I don't care how climate affects at that point, right? You got to get a lot more water on a lot more stuff or it's going to dry out.
Yeah, because more things need to drink. There's more mouths to feed.
Right. What are you looking at?
Well, I just wanted you to know that there have been about 45,000 wildfires this year. They've burned about 7 million acres this year, and that's about 1 million more acres than burn on the average based on the 10-year cycle.
Yeah. But of course, then the 10-year cycle is way above the prior 10-year cycle. So when you look at the bell curve on this, or the not bell curve, but you look at the curve on this.
Have you already looked at that?
I have.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just checking. I don't doubt you, but
I have.
I want to make sure you're not making stuff up.
Not making stuff
but
up.
You constantly do. So is that North America? you said
yes.
Okay,
yes.
That's North America. All right.
And that's already outdated since you said that line. I mean, the number is already wrong because there are just fires burning everywhere, chewing up acres as we speak. Right? That number is going to grow.
That's why I rounded up.
Yeah. Yeah. So one other thing that happened. Okay, so we're talking about all this additional fuel load, right? There's just so much more potential to burn. But we also had this other thing going on at the time, and it was our forest management, our logging practices at the time. So we're suppressing fires, but at the same time, we also have this insatiable need to build, like post-World War II. Like the amount of timber harvest that happened on national forests after World War II, that's another one of those exponential curves. It went up 600% between 1940 to 1966. And part of that was because, I mean, think about what happened after World War II. And everybody comes back, the economy starts to boom again.
People need to build houses.
The suburbs are growing.
Yeah.
Right?
Where I grew up in Florida, you can drive through neighborhoods, you can tell all the houses that were built right after the Second World War. I mean, that town really, exploded in population size, and you can tell like how many stick-built homes there are, and
some other interesting things happen too. And so, in addition to the building, you add a different kind of forestry, a different kind of logging because of mechanization, because of your capacity. You could do things that were very difficult to do before at a scale that you couldn't do before. And you did them in a way that was efficient and quick at the time. You tried to do it in the most economical way, and it's just different.
Which is called what?
What?
What they did back then. Clear cutting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I mean,
Sorry.
that's what you're talking about, right?
I didn't know you were. So yeah, and you now add one more piece on top of that. We started building in places that were different, where people wanted to live. Suddenly, where were we building? You weren't building in the neighborhood anymore in Florida. What became really gauche? Everybody wants to live in the mountains.
Oh,
and this
continues today.
Yes, and it's worse than ever before.
Oh, yeah,
and so,
for sure.
I mean, and something that's important to note when you look at the cycle of fires. Yes, we have more, but the other thing that cannot be ignored is that people have decided that they want to live in big houses in areas.
Yeah, and what comes with that is with that wildland urban interface area is suddenly you have policies coming in to say save those structures.
Yep, and you have risk
and risk and resources too. Like where are you putting all of your money now?
Yeah, and I don't just mean the risk of wildfire burning a house. I also mean, and we'll get to this, when you put people into an environment, you suddenly increase the risk for the environment.
Sure. Yeah. Can I go back to the clear cut piece for a second too?
Because I know you love clear cutting.
Oh, it's my favorite thing in the world. That's what I'd be doing for a living if I weren't doing this.
The world needs toothpicks.
No, on the clear cutting front. So from a forest management standpoint, one of the things that happened is the most valuable trees when people started clear cutting are not the little trees.
They're the big ones, yeah.
They're the big trees. Well, the big trees, from a forest standpoint, those are the ones that give you the fire resilience, right? They have the big, thick bark. They're, the canopy is way up high. Fires come underneath. You're not going to jump to the canopy. What happens is, so you cut down these big old growth, or you don't have to call them old growth if you don't want to, but mature stands, right, in mass. And then what comes up after them? High density
little guys,
right? That now you have this homogeneous forest.
And remember, we've also seen now, couple this again. So we're talking about this change in how the forests look, but you're also coupling that with a change in management that allows the fuel load to build, because you have a zero tolerance,
right,
for the small fires.
Right. So we have this. We're going to clear cut. We have snow tolerance for any fires whatsoever, which allows additional growth to come there. You have clear-cut areas that are starting to grow that are small. And it creates this recipe for things like, and this is one of the things my paper talks about,
You don't need to
pitch
pitch
plug it. No, I can't plug it.
Okay, Dave.
All right.
We've already talked
Pat
about
Davis.
it.
Did you?
Just talk about it again.
Okay. So
I mean, in prior episode.
Oh, okay. Well, so in 2010,
which happened around this time of year 2 years ago.
Yeah, fair enough.
Dave's Mountain's burning.
But the reason I kind of like to talk about this, because I wrote this 10 years ago.
Are you making money when?
Not at all.
Oh, just checking.
Not at all. I wrote it. So it's a law review article, and it's entitled "The Mountain Pine Beetle: How Forest Mismanagement and a Flawed Regulatory Structure Contributed to an Uncontrollable Epidemic." And the reason I want to mention it again and mention the time frame is specific to the beetle itself. So 10 years ago, I wrote this. And 10 years ago, I suggested, here's the history of forest management that led to this kind of unnatural forest that had gone through a century of suppression, and how the stands looked very different. And when you couple that, all this additional biomass with a generational or once in a several generation type of drought that happened, it created this environment that was absolutely perfect for pine beetles to come in and wipe out billions of trees from Colorado to British Columbia.
I don't think it's fair to say wipe out, because they're still there.
Well, they're all dead, but a lot of them aren't there anymore, and that was my point. One of the things that I said in this article, one of the hypotheses I had was that it was going to create this increased fuel load on forest floors as the trees started to fall. That when the beetles
when they go from standing dead to dead lying,
it was, if you made it through the first year without a fire, or first 2 years without a fire, you were probably going to make it 10 or 15, because it was in those first 2 years that the needles go from green to rust to drop. And once all the needles are gone, like, your ability for a crown fire to run and jump around and have this big explosion, is diminished, right? And so the thought was, you might not, if you have a fire when it's all rust, and any of you that have done that before, taken a branch of a dead tree that's all rusted and put it on a fire, right?
I feel like you've done that before.
I may have. You've seen what happens, right? Picture that on scale, right? But if you make it through those first couple of years, it's a lot harder to start a fire on something that doesn't have, that kind of those small.
How many pages
fuels.
is that article?
It's long enough.
I feel like you really. I feel like you should have done a book. I feel like there's a book in there.
There could be. Yeah, maybe so. But anyway, so then the theory was, okay, now fast forward 15 or 20 years, and after 7 to 10, some of those trees are going to start to fall. And then a lot of those trees are going to start to fall. And then you're going to have this fuel load build up on the forest floor. And what that's going to cause, is maybe more harmful than a crown fire. Crown fire, you get the heat from that fire releases the seeds from the serotinous cones on the forest floor, and that's what causes the regeneration of forests, right? But if you have all this fuel build up on the forest floor and it comes through hot, I can tell you from walking through a fire last year that had this, it burned the stump out of the ground. There were just holes in the ground where stumps were.
Have you read American Buffalo?
Yeah.
Because I feel like this is better than that, if you would just get to writing it.
I don't know. American Buffalo is a pretty darn good book.
It's good, but I think that you should set the bar and go after it.
Yeah, whatever. I appreciate that. Hearing that. But what I wanted to say was, to finish it, and then I'll kick it to you, was, I made this prediction a decade ago, and now we're seeing, and other people were making similar predictions, I'm sure, but they didn't get theirs published. I did. But a decade ago, saying, this is what's going to happen when you fast forward and all these trees fall. Yeah. Like, these fires don't surprise me in the West, where there were beetle kill, don't surprise me at all.
Yeah, we've been waiting for it for decades. Or a decade.
A decade, yeah. Right?
It's unfortunate, and it's an unfortunate reality of where we're at. I think, you talked a little bit about the vegetative aspect, but since I'm a soils geek, I would tell you, here's what happens when you go from those low intensity fires to the high intensity fires is you literally bake the soil sterile.
Yeah.
And so you kill everything in there, all the microbes, all the organisms that retain water, that cause good soil structure, that is just all gone.
Yeah,
and
your seed bank's gone too.
Yeah.
So you have zero regeneration. You have to wait for the winds to bring new stuff in.
And it's not just the seeds. It is
you've lost the nutrients in the soil too.
There's still minerals in there, but it just kills the organics. It just really is just bad news.
So you're starting from like the Big Bang.
It literally is like a moonscape.
We need a meteor to come in and hit that spot to bring
then
some
at least
more.
It'd be cool because we'd be like, oh yeah, it was a meteor.
Yeah.
But no,
but Dave, we took our kids hunting in a moonscape last year, and there was nothing.
Yeah. I mean, it
just
burned up. And I have pictures
dust.
from the place where you and I went.
Yeah.
Where there was a spot where we walked and it took us like 10 minutes to walk it.
Yeah.
And it took me over 2 hours to walk it before the fire.
Yeah. No, I remember that. A couple times.
You'd climb over stuff and you'd look down and all of a sudden you're 10 feet off the ground. It's like a giant game of human pickup sticks, like with all these down trees.
Yeah. I've got a picture.
All of that burned to nothing, just to ash.
Yeah. I did get a picture of my daughter standing next to this one tree, like hollowed out sort of husk of a tree that had kind of, still 10 feet tall and the roots were still there.
Yeah.
But it was one of those that, as big as a dining room table, kind of round table size of a tree, right?
So
it's absolutely amazing.
So it's definitive.
Gone.
It is forest management. That's what happened. It's forest management. It's definitive. That is the only thing. It's not Antifa. It's not climate change.
Can I layer on a couple more?
Go ahead.
I want to layer on a couple more things that happened since the middle. So that took you to through the 50s, like the forest management, the logging, that sort of thing. And I'll do this part fast. But we went into this era of environmentalism, and I don't know if that's the right era to call it, in the 1960s and 70s, right, where we're passing landmark statutes. Congress is passing landmark statutes.
We're in Birkenstocks. We are driving a Prius.
We're seeing rivers on fire and thinking maybe that shouldn't happen. We're seeing, we're seeing, forests being clear cut and at a scale that that the forest can't support, and saying maybe that shouldn't happen. And so there are laws that pass, and some of the ones that passed in that time frame are things like the Multiple Use and Sustained Yield Act, right? The Forest Service Management Act, right? I might be getting the it's the National Forest Management Act, not Forest Service. NIFMA, National Forest Management Act, the Endangered Species Act, and the National Environmental Policy Act. Those four, in particular, had pretty significant impacts on how a forest would be managed from that point going forward. So we still have this suppression, but now we have big time planning requirements too. So and environmental assessments of any projects that you want to do.
Lots and lots of paperwork and red tape if you're going to work in a forest.
Right. So you have
for good and for
absolutely,
ill.
absolutely.
Some of this stuff people who don't understand things sometimes make mistakes.
Right.
And so it pays to understand something. Having said that, it takes time and money to understand sometimes.
Right. And it takes time and money to fight people that disagree with you.
Yes.
Right. And so, you have things like the National Environmental Policy Act that, when you look at it on its face, you're thinking, that's not a bad idea, that a federal agency should have to take a hard look at any actions to, its decisions and see how they might impact the human environment. That sounds like a good thing.
And significant actions.
And
which that threshold changed.
So much of it changed, right? And what the breadth of the analysis and, what considerations have to go in, right?
It's fair to say
changed over 50 years. And we could spend, a dozen podcasts on that.
And have.
But but that does create an opportunity. So you do the NIFMA, the National Forest Management Act. When you read that in conjunction with NEPA, right, National Forest Management Act would say, okay, we're going to break these forests into different units, and then these different units are going to plan for their activities on that forest for the next 10 to 15 years. Right? And it might be areas that are appropriate for logging, might be areas that they want to do things for wildlife, might be places that they want to work on for recreation. There might be overlap among all of those things.
Yeah, they create a forest plan that is analogous to a resource management plan on BLM land.
Yeah. And then when they want to then take those actions that are authorized under that plan, then they're
More
going
NEPA.
More NEPA, right? Individual project NEPA, basically. And there are multiple trigger points for, one, the planning process can take a while, but two, reviewing the planning process judicially can take a while.
Yeah, because with every step there, you're talking about opportunities for review, not just by the agencies, but also by the public, opportunities for comment, opportunities to weigh in. So this is a time-consuming process.
And let's be clear, the challenges, judicial challenges to a lot of these come from the spectrum, right? Like
National Home Builders Association all the way to an environmental group.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yep. Because they all have their own interests and own thoughts on how the forest should be managed. And so that gets hammered out. And sometimes that gets hammered out to the detriment of the forest and the detriment of the ability to take certain actions that might help.
Yeah.
And you can't underestimate the impact of those cases have had on forest management since the 1982 rule, so the regulations that came out under the National Forest Management Act in 1982 that were the bedrock sort of requirements for how they did things, sat in place for over about 18 years, and all those judicial decisions that evolved and sort of changed the interpretation or filled out the interpretation, how things would worked out. A lot of that was geared towards addressing wildlife concerns, since federal agencies are responsible for managing habitat rather than wildlife. Yet, a lot of the ways the decisions and challenges came down is as if the federal agency should be managing wildlife. And then you had a period of from 2000 to 2012, just I think 4 different changes to that regulation to try to undo a lot of that, or get back and start fresh. Just a decade's worth of rulemaking, draft this, change to that. It's just been sort of lately. It's been kind of a status, a more even keel status. But the changes in regulations and the NIFMA has been pretty significant.
I think it's also worth mentioning. This gets lost in these discussions of what's best for the forest. What's best for the forest? Well, it's not objective. It's purely subjective. This idea that there's the right thing and the wrong thing for the forest, that doesn't exist. Science doesn't tell you what the right thing or the wrong thing to do. Science doesn't care. Those decisions are made by managers. They're made by people who decide. And so when the homeowners association says they want this, it's because of what their vision of what that resource should look like, versus there's somebody wearing Birkenstocks and drinking their coffee who really does want it all.
You're really
left
down on
alone.
Birkenstocks.
I love them. I have a pair. They're so comfy. So, but
they're not going to be sponsoring us if you keep doing this.
No,
you just have this thing about bashing brands.
Gosh, I shouldn't do that. You're right. But what I'm saying is that, like, often you talk about, like, what's the right thing to science does not have morality. It doesn't say that. It doesn't decide which management choice should be the best and should be the worst. That is a personal decision based on what people think. It's based on personal morals. And we are trying to come together as a society and make those decisions. But we all have to remember, the guy that sued to not have you do something, that guy has just, his opinion is different than the other guy's opinion. One is not right and one is not wrong. It's an opinion.
But let's, okay.
I mean, it's just a sticky point to realize. And I'm not saying that, that I'm not on board with you for like, yes, there's a right way to manage. I believe that. You believe that. But everybody's not going to agree with us because other people have different perceptions of what they want to manage.
I didn't know you had a philosophy degree. You're getting all philosophical here. But he threw a crayon at me. And it still didn't break. It hit the floor and still didn't break. No, I'm not going to throw it back.
Well, I need it. My trees aren't done.
But what I did want to say is, if you take I think if you were to poll the scientific community, like one thing that you would want from a management standpoint is better forest resiliency. So thinking back to what can we do to make the forest more resemble maybe what it was 120, 130 years ago before we started our maybe ill-advised management, which wasn't ill-advised at the time, but with the benefit of time to look back, maybe was. The question is, how do you do that? And here's what I'd here's what I'd propose, and I want to have a discussion about it.
Okay.
So all of the debate that I see in the news is saying, it's coming into like two camps. Well, there's probably more camps, but I'm going to do two camps because they're two issues we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. One is if we just get in there and let them cut down a bunch of trees, thin this stuff out, remove some of this, some of the dying trees, the beetle-killed trees, that'd solve it. That's a solution, right? And then there's another piece that says, all right, if we build in other resiliency and management to address some of the climate concerns, right? Address invasives, just try and deal with get more carbon.
Stop climate from changing.
Create it.
Stop climate from
I'm just saying, make it a carbon sink, right? Set it up in the right way to bring in the most carbon, right?
More management, more cultivation management.
I don't know if cultivation management.
No, you're thinking you're talking about people who are thinking like that more trees growing equals we're sucking carbon out of the atmosphere.
No. Bigger trees.
Bigger trees. Okay.
Bigger trees. Getting back to but that kind of comes with the management giving back to the regime we had before. Like how do we do that? And so this is what I would say, and then say, okay, let's talk about it. Both of those ideas are fine and probably would help, but they're generational type of solutions, aspirational and generational. And the proof of that is you can look at places where partnerships have happened with NGOs, non-government organizations and Forest Service, or with states, or there have been some pilot projects over, 3 to 15, even 30,000 acres to do some of these things. Great. But if you don't do the same thing right next door and a lightning strike hits that, it's going to burn right through, which has happened a lot this year. There are some of the fires in Oregon in particular have burned just one of the big complexes, 70% of that burn is treated area, right? So, you need something that's durable over a long, long time horizon. We could invest billions of dollars in some of these management prescriptions, but if you can't do it on when I say landscape, I mean like some of these fires are hundreds of thousands of acres in size, right?
Yeah, when you were describing the type of management idea, it really, to me, when I said cultivate, it made it sound like what I was trying to describe it made it sound like the idea came from a backyard garden in theory, but I'm sitting here going, how do you translate that to the continent?
Right.
Which is kind of the scale you're now talking about.
Right.
If you're going to actually have this happen over generations.
And so, one of the things you need, because that's a generational aspiration, I'm not saying we shouldn't shoot for it. I'm saying we absolutely should try and come up with these generational solutions to address this. But we need, I don't know if a stopgap or a Band-Aid, or we need short-term vision too, because the long-term vision won't work without a short-term vision as well.
You're right. Once again, and this is, I mean, just to back up, all I'm saying is, and what I was saying is this: that requires missionary work. It requires everybody getting on the same page, because once again, there's not one answer at this moment. There's a lot of different ideas about what we should do and where it should go and what it should be, and none of them are necessarily wrong, because none of them are necessarily right. They're opinions. And that's part of the challenge that you face, is getting everybody around the table to agree that, hey, you know what we need to do? We need to do management better, and we need to do it in this way. And that requires education. It requires work. It requires sweat. It requires pragmatism.
But also presumes that everybody that's sitting around the table are going to be there for multiple generations. You're going to have new voices come in over time, new ideas for things.
So you have to be able to be adaptable too.
Correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But in order to be successful and adaptable, you still have to have some short-term things. And this gets back to the beginning. This is something I really want to mention, because it's something that I've done some research on this.
Yeah, because we can argue about whether it's Antifa or the management, and how much we need to change the management paradigm versus how much we need to change this versus how much we need to, and again, realize that I'm making a joke about saying that it's Antifa. That's so don't anybody write me letters and being like, I thought you covered, it's not. No, I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying.
So what's the short-term fix, David?
So here's my deal. And I'm committed to actually doing more research on this, because I don't have all the numbers lined up right now. But what I can tell you is that in the past decade or so, maybe slightly longer time frame than that even, roughly 85% of all wildfires in this country are human caused. Right? We absolutely have big mega fires that are started by lightning and perhaps other natural causes. But we also have, forgot to mention, this is kicking me way back. One of the causes of that 1910 fire.
Mm-hmm. Was it a gender reveal?
No, but I was weird. Yeah. It was sparks off of a train. Like not sparks, but coal powered, not
the wheel brakes, but the
why you got to blame coal?
The boiler,
boiler, spraying,
and
they.
For the boiler.
But the thing is, that was a known thing, and back then they actually had people hired that followed behind the train to put those out. Only it was so dry and so windy they just couldn't, and that actually started dozens of the fires. Anyway, back to the present. I remembered one of the other causes of the
That's
fires
actually
back
super
then, and I thought it was
interesting.
Kind of an interesting thing, right?
Yeah.
But here we have 85% of fires are human caused. And you have the anomaly fires, like you just mentioned, this baby reveal that's now turned into one of the largest fires in California history, right? You have, what was it a couple of years ago, the largest in California history as far as at least from cost, maybe acreage too, but cost, loss of life, that sort of thing was it the Paradise Fire? Anyway, it was the one that was caused by the power line, like a transformer or something on that, like it. So you have those types of events. You have events. There was another fire in California started when somebody got a flat tire and they did the rim of the tire shots, created sparks on the road and started a fire. You have those kinds of events, but a lot
people that needs to settle in for people though. That really needs to settle in.
85%.
85% are caused by what?
Humans.
They're caused by people. And so I think that's when people, and that's the danger. Somebody's like, oh, it's Antifa. Well, no, but yes, it's people. Yeah. For all this discussion that we've gone through about like forest management and climate and all these other things, there's one factor that you really can't ignore.
But that you can control.
It's 85% of these fires are caused by us being dumb.
Now, some of them, I don't know how you fix some of the things like a flat tire randomly causing a spark. But you know what? There are a lot of fires started by people in the backcountry that build a fire, they've put it out, and then a windstorm comes in after they've abandoned it and kicks it back up and starts a big fire, right? I've been on a lot of backpacking trips over the past 4 or 5 months, and all but one of them, there have been some level of fire restriction in place. And every single one of those where there are fire restrictions, I counted more fires in the backcountry than I can count on both hands that people were having. And I started confronting people about it. I'm like, you might think that you're not causing a problem. Like, you might think that you're responsible and you're going to put this out. But you can't guarantee me that. You can't guarantee that. Right? Yeah. And that these regulations are put in place for a reason. But here's the other problem. And the reason I mentioned the regulations is that we have these regulations, these stage 1 and stage 2 fire restrictions. Stage 2 fire restrictions mean no fires in campgrounds. You can't smoke a cigarette outside of your car. You can't have a fire in the backcountry. And there are penalties for not adhering to that. On Forest Service land, I believe that penalty ranges from as little as $100 to as much as about $1,000. On BLM land, ironically enough, I believe I saw somewhere that the potential fine is up to $100,000. They take it way more seriously on what was viewed as trash land so long ago. but my point is, we have this regulatory system that clearly isn't a deterrent, because I see all these fires all over the place. And one of the reasons it's not a deterrent, in my opinion, the fine is too low, as is the risk of being caught. So, give you one quick example, and I'll stop talking for a second. This is unrelated to fires, but it gives you an example. So on an elk hunt, probably 18, 20 years ago, I've told you this probably told you both this. Elk hunt 18 or 20 years ago, there's an area of roadless, and it's not a wilderness, it's roadless. A couple miles back in, these folks from Minnesota had killed an elk.
Minnesota. Why you got to name specific states?
I'm just
Dave?
saying.
Why you got to make them feel bad?
I just got to complete the story.
Okay.
From Minnesota, they killed this elk. And
it wasn't Ryan Bronson, was it?
It may have been, but I doubt it. He's a good dude. He's not going to do something like that.
Okay.
No, it's not him. They walk back out, and they get their ATV, and they drive out to this elk.
It was Ryan.
No, not Ryan. Stop going that way. They drive out to this elk, downhill, 2 miles into this hole where they killed this elk. We see this happen. This was back in early days of cell phone coverage. We had a satellite phone, if I recall. We called the Forest Service. The Forest Service in this instance, Medicine Bow National Forest in Wyoming has, 5 different units. Thunder Basin National Grasslands, Sierra Madre, Snowy Range, Laramie Range, the Vidvu area, and the Laramie Peak unit. And those are spread apart by a couple hundred miles, right? They had 2 law enforcement officers to cover all of that. We happened to pick up the phone and call on a day that one of those 2 happened to be right in the area where we were. And they said, we'll get a call out to them. They'll be over there in like 15, 20 minutes. Waited there. They got there. We explained what happened. The fine at the time for driving an ATV off-road was $50. So, of course, anybody's like, I'll just risk it, I'll pay the $50 to not have to pack an elk out for 2 miles, right? Easy, right? No big deal if I get caught. Plus, what are the chances of me getting caught? There's only 2 law enforcement out here. This guy goes down there, catches them down at the elk with the ATV. They're finishing, getting it all quartered up and loaded up. He writes them a ticket, and then he takes the keys to the ATV. And he said, you can have these keys back when you show me that you've packed the elk out and that you've pushed the ATV out. Those guys never hunted there again. and so my point is, it wasn't a deterrent until it caused them some physical pain. And bringing it back to forest management, the enforcement budget for the Forest Service is so low, and the amount of personnel that they have is so low, and the penalties are so low, they can't possibly monitor or catch a fraction of the people that are breaking the law or contributing to the start of these fires. They can't possibly get enough people out into the field to just hike trails and check on what would be typical backcountry campsites, or and bury all that stuff. They don't have the resources to do it. But you know what? Where their money does go? In 1995, 16% of the Forest Service budget went to fighting fires. The projected budget for 2025, 67% of the entire Forest Service budget going to fire suppression activities. We're talking, $1 billion, something like $1.5 billion a year, maybe more than that, going to fighting fires on Forest Service alone. That doesn't even count BLM or anything else.
85% of the time those fires are started by humans?
Yes.
85% of the time started by humans.
So don't you think if this is idealistic,
and here's the other,
don't you think if we invested, a couple $100 million of that $1.5 billion, and that doesn't even count for all the property loss and the loss of life and everything else that comes from these fires. That's just the budget, the line item budget of the Forest Service. That doesn't count for anything else. Local enforcement that are coming out in a supporting role, National Guard that are coming in a supporting role.
Yeah, that's not cost.
No.
That's just,
That's just the budget in that one agency.
Yeah.
What if we spent a couple $100 million and got a lot more boots on the ground? What if we changed the regulations or increase the penalties to make it really sting if you mess up? Create a true deterrent and have people out there enforcing the deterrent. Do you think we maybe could take that 85% down to 25%?
Spoken like an attorney. No, I agree with you in a sense, but here's the other thing that I think more important, and is this. 85% of those fires are started by people. And you know what? I think maybe I've said this joke before, but think about the average person, and then remember that 50% of people are dumber than that.
So that was when you were going to come up with a
good thing all of our listeners are above average.
Well, yeah, of course.
Hold on. So the reason I say that quickly is this. When was the last time you saw Smokey the Bear stuff? When was the last time you saw people talking about, Dave, you said something, you're like, how many people know that driving around in their car with no tire on the rim is going to cause a forest fire? We really need to do a better job of educating. Now I'll let you go, Mike.
I was going to say, you were thinking of 85%, and if there were enough boots on the ground to enforce and it stung enough, would it come down to, and you were that pregnant pause of a number, and you said 25%. I don't agree. I think maybe 85 would come down 25% with significant amount of effort and education, all that, because of Nephi's first point. People are stupid.
They're still going to do it.
Yeah, there's still going to be problems, and there'll still be those that...
But do you think a combination of education and enforcement...
Would it make a difference?
Like I said...
It'd make a difference.
I think it would make a difference to come down from 85% to 60%. I think it would come down...
The fire that rained ash on us yesterday.
Yeah.
Suspected human cause.
That makes sense, yeah.
They say suspected. We know it's human cause. There's no weather that day. We know where it is. You can pinpoint kind of where the location was started. Unfortunately, and this pains me to say this,
elk hunting.
It was an archery elk hunter, almost guaranteed.
Yeah,
in the backcountry of the Savage Run Wilderness.
And understand this. Gosh, this hurts to say, but it has to be understood. We're not doing a good enough job. We're not doing a good enough job when we're out in the backcountry. And I'm going to tell a personal admonition story. I'm going to tell a story. Like when I was a Boy Scout, the
statute of limitations is passed on this.
I hope so. I remember we were in the wilderness in Idaho on a horse packing trip, and Jake Reynolds, who is not listening to this, and Calvin Beard, who I'm sure is not listening to this, we set off late from camp one day because we had spent a bunch of time, doing practical jokes on everybody else at camp while they were riding up to go fishing. That we left late to go fish at this high mountain lake. On our way up to that lake, we get hit in July by this snowstorm, and everybody's just soaked. Everybody's freezing, like literally. It was. I mean, way up in the boonies in Idaho. So we stopped to build a fire. Right? Where do you build a fire? if you're Boy Scouts.
You build a fire ring.
Build a fire ring right where you find lots of wood. Calvin decided right underneath the giant tree was a great place to build
water.
a fire.
I mean, 100 feet from water.
The short version of the story is this: so built a fire. Everybody else came back down, put the fire out, came out. The next year we went up there to that exact same spot, and you know what? That tree was torched.
You got lucky.
Got super lucky. Some Boy Scouts who do a fire in a tree, and that tree, and they're like, yeah, the fire is out. You're pouring all this water on it, but literally, and how many times as elk hunters? Just think about this, everybody. How many times as elk hunters have you sat there and looked for a dry spot to try and build your fire when where there's, it's something to be cognizant of. And when you learned it when you were a kid, you learned it in Boy Scouts. Don't build a fire there. Dig it out. You learned all those things. The other thing to think about, though, is this new generation of hunters coming into the field, this new generation of outdoors people. How many of those people spent 6 years in a Boy Scout program? Not many.
Not many.
There are a whole lot of people going into the backcountry now who are even dumber than we were when we were Boy Scouts and we were doing those types of things because they just don't have that knowledge. It's something that we actually really, really need to do better on because, again, 85% of these are caused by what?
Yeah.
People.
By people. And, you touched on something earlier, too. One of the other – so I mentioned all these resources that the Forest Service has for fire, for fighting fires. You know where a lot of those resources have to go? They have to go into protecting the structures of the people that decided I need to live in these places. Right? Instead of being able to build fire lines or do, backfires or, maybe attack places from a management standpoint, like if you were thinking from a landscape management standpoint, that might be, maybe you could use these fires to your advantage to do some of the management you want to do. But all these resources, we're reading about this Mullen fire, and all the resources are going to protecting structures right now. Everybody that's out there, because everybody's stretched thin, every person that's out there is really working on protecting houses, which is great. I don't want to see anybody's house or livelihood burned down. But we made these decisions 100 years ago to move into these places, and it kind of affects how we do management as a result of that too.
And again, right or wrong? No, there wasn't a right or wrong.
No,
It's the paradigm of management that what people wanted. They're like, hey, I want to live. This is what we want. This is where we want to do these things. And again, it's a decision that was made. It's not right or wrong. But now we have to figure out, okay, well, how do we manage to be able to accommodate those decisions?
Here's another thing I want to add. So for people that might say, well, I don't do a lot of outdoor recreation. I'm not a camper. I don't hunt. Yeah, I'm inconvenienced by the smoke when it comes through. But I don't I don't believe in climate change. Just like this doesn't really affect me except for the few days that the smoke comes through. Why should I care? Well, so if you live in the West in particular, anywhere in the West, you should probably care because where do you think your water comes from? Right? And
the tap, Dave.
My bad. The tap. Yeah.
Sam's Club.
We get our.
I shouldn't have mentioned a brand. I'm sorry. This is not an endorsement.
Anyway, we get our water from snowmelt. A lot of our water from snowmelt. Mm-hmm. The Colorado River is the lifeblood for the Southwest, from Phoenix, for Los Angeles, for Las Vegas, right? That's one river, and everything in between. That's one river system. You've got river systems all over the place that headwater somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, and the water, municipal supplies in a lot of instances, it's coming from these places. And when you have these massive fires on levels, because so many humans are starting them too, perhaps on levels we haven't seen before, right? That it could be altering the hydraulic cycle too, right? It could be causing snow. It could cause less snowpack because you have a lot more radiant heat coming down.
It absolutely does.
It could cause it to melt off
faster. It's not
faster.
it could. It does. These things, yeah, these management decisions have consequences. And again, It's not a right or wrong. It's just that management decisions have consequences. To manage it a certain way or to choose not to manage it and let nature take its course, if that's what we want to call burning, these things have consequences. And we're going to have to respond to those. And that's where your discussions about policy really need to change. It's not like you did this right, you did this wrong. It's like, okay, here's the consequences of the choice that you're about to make. Do you really want to make that choice? Because, if you do, fine, but go in there with eyes wide open.
And we haven't even talked about BLM, force on BLM, fires on BLM and the effects of that. And there's not much time to really do that. But I will say one thing that's different on BLM than Forest Service, particularly as you move farther west into like Nevada and into the Oregon and Washington and Idaho, some in Wyoming too. But invasive species there are a huge contributor to massive wildfires. I mean, we just had a wildfire in Oregon that burned up something like, I'm going to get this wrong, I shouldn't say it, so I'll give a really wide range because then I'm safer, right?
Something like a lot.
Somewhere between 30 and 70% of sage-grouse habitat in the state, of where the sage-grouse populations are in that state, burned up in one fire. And the fires were exacerbated by cheatgrass, which is
what a surprise!
Which is not native to the United States, right?
You mean Japanese brome isn't?
Right. And so for BLM lands, like the issues from a management standpoint might be a little bit different than they are from the Forest Service. And for BLM lands, it might be we have to figure out a plan to deal with some of these invasive species that are causing really significant problems.
It doesn't get as much attention, though, does it? Because everybody sees a forest, and that's where you build your cabin. You don't build your cabin in the middle of sage land.
Right. But that sage land might burn up.
And when it burns,
300,000, 400,000, 500,000 acres at a time.
Yeah.
And or less, but they've had some huge fires, especially in Idaho and Nevada and Oregon.
Remember the scientific name for cheatgrass or
I think it's all 4-letter words.
Anyway, but
that's all I've ever heard it described as.
But absolutely, exactly. I mean, it's one of the other things that's interesting is like we hear so much this fire season. You're hearing so much about it, right? But how much are we over what we have every year? 15%. 15%. And so,
what do you mean?
That's how much more is burned on the average year this year. And so while everyone is paying attention to it this year for whatever reason, because of the geography of it or whatever, this is happening every year. This 85% is happening every year. These challenges are occurring every year.
That beeping in the background is my baby monitor, just so everybody knows.
I thought it was, it seemed like...
Let's see if I can move it a little
Russian
bit.
spy
Get
or something.
Beeping to stop.
It's Morse code coming across your baby monitor. It's kind of creepy.
I had to get a new baby monitor. So we live, this is another side tangent. We live, the Air Force base is right behind us here. Mm-hmm. And
a lot of planes.
Black Hawk helicopters, right? They fly Black Hawks here. And when my second was born, we had a different baby monitor. And one night I wasn't home because I traveled quite a bit for work. And my wife was awakened in the middle of the night to the sound of, or not middle of the night, but 9, 10 o'clock. She went to bed pretty early. She was awakened to the sound of men's voices in the house. And it sounded like it was coming from the baby's room. And so she started to absolutely freak out until she realized she was picking up the communication of the pilots in the helicopters. So
still creepy.
I wound up out there for something on the base for something, and the commander of that unit, I was talking to him, and I said, just so you know, you're flying these $10 million helicopters.
And we're listening to you.
And I can hear every word you say. Like I know everything about you, everything you're doing on my Fisher-Price technology. The next day, I didn't hear it ever again.
You know what?
We were picking it up every night.
Have you considered that your house might actually be haunted?
No, it's not.
Because there's a lot of crazy,
weird stuff happens here.
Crazy stuff happening in this house.
Yeah, weird stuff happens here. Yeah. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent as I'm dealing with the baby monitor, but kind of crazy. Anyway, the forest stuff. One thing I did want to mention. So we talk about this treatment stuff and protecting watersheds. I'm just going to unplug this and hope that my kid stays asleep. It's really starting to get annoying. I'll just turn it off. That started going off. My dog started whimpering, having to go out of it. But so the Forest Service does have these ambitions. They have these plans that actually call for them to do some treatment options, to do some stand thinning, to do some veg control, some watershed management. But I just want to tell you this. This is since 2001. Vegetation and watershed management budget down 24%. Capital improvements and maintenance down 68%.
That was a big push during H.W. Bush's term to get that sort of understory cleaned up.
Yeah,
and there was significant opposition from certain groups to going in and doing that.
Wildlife and fisheries habitat management down 18%. Land ownership management down 33%. Land management planning, so updating these land plans and trying to tackle some of these issues, down 64%.
Is that a consequence of the raise in fire suppression costs?
Yeah, there's a direct correlation because the actual amount of money that was coming into the agency was relatively stable. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like...
It's just a shift from being able to manage stuff so that you don't have a dumpster fire to having to try and put out the dumpster fire.
Yeah, you're paying for the reaction rather than paying for the planning.
Well, the other thing that was going on for the longest time is a thing called fire borrowing. Right, so you'd get this agency budget, and then you'd have all these grand plans to do certain things, certain treatment options, and then you'd have fire seasons like this.
Yeah,
and all of your resources you'd have to pull from all those.
Yeah,
you borrow from those programs to pay to fight the fires.
Yeah, kind of funny. Now it's actually, the shift in the amount of money being spent on the thing is the same. It's just now it's actually starts in that checking account rather than having to steal it from the other checking accounts. It hasn't given us more money to do the thing. It's just we're being more honest about it.
I got to fix that door. It's pretty creaky.
I know. It sounds like a haunted house.
Yeah, it gets back to that point, right?
Your dog's face is just wet. What the heck is out there?
You're right. Jeez, what did you get into, buddy? Yeah. So I guess the point is, we didn't dive too deeply into the long-term solutions, but there are, from a long-term standpoint, we don't need to talk about it. We know what the visions are out there. Thinning options, habitat improvement options, resilience, forest resilience, ideas. All these concepts are floating around out there, but and should be pursued. Like all of these options, these conversations should happen. But if we keep spending more and more and more and more on fighting fires, Congress doesn't have the resources. It can print more money, I guess, just indebt our great-grandchildren a little bit. But they can't expand the budget. What? I guess put another way, why would Congress appropriate hundreds of millions of dollars of money for resilience projects when 85% of these fires are human caused, and people might go down there and you might invest all this money in a project, and the very next year that might burn to the ground because somebody was being dumb, right? We want forests that can be resilient to fire, that can have more natural fire regimes like they did in the past. We want to be able to do prescribed burns where appropriate. There's a lot of management techniques that would be good to have, right? But none of that matters if we can't get this problem under control of people starting fires.
You're right. And I think that to me, is one of the worst reasons for blaming all these other things, for blaming, these generational challenges that we face, or maybe, these, challenges that maybe we can't fix them. Maybe we can have an impact 100 years from now. But whether or not we're going to be able to measure that, well, it's very arguable that we're not going to be able to recognize it very easily. What can we do? We can quit blaming things that are outside of our scope of influence, and we can start working on those things now. Because anytime this is an opinion, but anytime a whole group of us can pick one of those things that we talked about and blame Antifa, and then not have any personal responsibility, or not, and say like it's not my issue, I'm going to have a gender reveal party today or whatever.
It's everybody's responsibility.
That's our problem.
Yeah. But I don't have any. I want to make sure I'm clear because I don't have any problem. I think the benefit of history, the being able to answer the why. Why are we in this situation today? Being able to answer the why is important to be able to come up with durable solutions 100 years from now.
Absolutely.
So I think that's important. Like I don't have any problem with saying,
but I think
we
that's
might
all
have made
part
some
of it.
mistakes in the past that we need to figure out how to rectify. But being able to say we could make the policy change today and pump all the money we could print into that today, and that still doesn't address one of the underlying problems, which is people are stupid.
Yeah. You certainly you have to do. You've got a problem here. You have to do the triage today.
Yeah.
You have to do the triage right now to stop the bleeding, and recognize that you've got a whole lot of physical therapy coming up. You've got a whole lot of work to do later.
Yeah. I think my dog wants us to be done. He's sitting by the door to go back into the main part of the house.
No.
Maybe he wants to go to bed. Maybe
Let him.
Maybe I'll let him do that.
Maybe you should go check on the kids.
Yeah, that's
Good
probably-
job, Gannett.
That's what he'll do.
Go check on the kids.
That's right. You just gave away my dog's name. Yeah, Gannett.
I'm not too worried about
No,
it.
you're not.
Yeah.
Gannett's a good dog.
The third listener that's still left on this
Yeah.
show.
Yeah, we've gone on for a while, huh?
Yeah.
But I'm not sorry.
You never are. You're not.
There's so much more we could cover on this. We probably shouldn't.
I'm
probably should
sorry.
wrap it up.
I'm sorry I threw that crayon at you. I feel terrible.
It left a mark. Not
Is it
really.
green?
No.
Oh, the
Black
mark,
and
I thought.
blue. Threw it so hard, it bruised me.
Ego?
No.
I didn't
No.
think so.
No. That can't be bruised. All right, so I think we've beat this
Yeah.
horse. We've bludgeoned this thing at this
Well,
point.
I think
right?
it's the best episode we've ever done.
I think there's so much we didn't talk about, which is great. Actually, I don't think we have to go into the depth on some of all the forest management practices on the climate issues.
Wait till
that's
the
all
next
in the
time.
future.
I'm going to
Next
talk
time we're
about
gonna do
Lake
it.
Bonneville and the Paleozoic.
Ooh, next time. I made one promise on social media I have to keep.
Is it about the Paleozoic?
No, but it starts with a P.
Nope.
Let's finish it with the Pendley.
Oh. Why wouldn't we, since he's done?
Right?
Maybe he's not, though.
So that's the thing that's, I think all these media reports have been a little bit misleading about. Mm-hmm. In that,
It just keeps on giving. It's the gift that keeps giving, doesn't it?
well, so he's done in the sense of the word that he can no longer serve in a capacity where he exercises the authority of the director of the Bureau of Land Management. It doesn't mean he can't still work at the Bureau of Land Management in a
As the
non-Senate confirmed position.
Like
right?
deputy director?
Yeah, but he can't sign off on anything that would require the authority of the director. But he can certainly still. I mean,
He's still going to be at a desk there.
Yeah, he's not done at BLM,
Yeah. It's just
and he's
so
still going to be in a
crazy.
high.
Well, and that's
ranking
what you're
position.
saying too is dependent upon the appeal that is going to happen,
Right.
That has already been promised.
Right, and you know why they're appealing that?
Well, if you are
I know why. I think I know.
So here's my theory. If you're the Department of the Interior and you're the press person that gets the call on this, you're going to say we're going to appeal, right? But if you're the Department of Justice, which has a different decision, I mean, they're looking at it from a different analysis. And
That's
if you're
what I was
the
gonna ask you.
solicitor who actually makes the appeal decision, not the Department of Justice, you're looking at this and you're making a judgment call on whether or not the judge was in the right mind or not in the right mind, but in the right sufficiently, or what impact this has on the administration's, the future administration, future administration's ability to manage itself. And so they're looking at it from a
Bigger
good government type of situation.
Yep.
We want to handle it. It's not a personal attack. It has a lot less to do with this individual, this interior. It really is kind of one of those things of, are we as an executive branch in the right in this situation to do these things? And do we want to maintain that ability to continue to do these things? And that's what's going to make the decision on the appeal or not. Because there's really not another way to go around it. Many times appeals are taken in one place but not in the other because similar issues, and they'll pick which one to go with. This one's squarely teed up, and it's very political. But I don't think that the solicitor's office is really going to look at it in that direction, though.
So I have a question for you. So two things popped to my mind as I read this, as I read the opinion. One was, okay, what are all the decisions that Pendley made as the acting director that might be subject to repeal?
That's a good question.
And I don't know that any of us know the answer to that yet.
Well, the other thing that I don't know, David, is whether or not it's every decision that he was the signature on, or is it also things for which he had significant influence on, but wasn't the final signer? Like, how extensive does that go?
Right. And I don't know. One thing I know is, like, he has 17 pages of conflicts when he took that job. So there were a lot of decisions that he just couldn't touch. Mm-hmm. So is this going to impact everything at BLM? No. But it could impact a whole bunch of stuff? Maybe. I don't know. But the other question that came to mind, I'm really interested in your thoughts on this. This was a very narrow case on a single individual and certain actions taken in Montana to create the standing.
That's what it was about, yeah.
For that issue, right? There are many, many other people across agencies in this administration that are serving in similar capacities and have for a long time.
Right.
That have not been formally nominated, or in this instance were nominated and then nomination withdrawn, but never went through a confirmation process. Even though this was narrow, the issue is on all fours, as you would say, for all of these others. And would you anticipate that this serves as the basis for a broader challenge?
I do. I think that others will challenge. Yes. Yeah. Based following this logic, absolutely. Will it have automatic application and translation? No, not necessarily. But it does cause a lot of concern, which is what the solicitor is going to be looking at.
That was going to be what I was going to circle right back to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Back to
so that's what we're talking about here is what is the ramification for this? And I don't know that has been ultimately decided in the Montana case. I didn't read Judge Morris's opinion, so I have no idea.
Very narrow.
But did he give a remedy?
The remedy was removal of Pendley from that position. He could no longer act in that authority, and it gave the parties 10 days to submit, to file paperwork that would say, here are the decisions that should be vacated, that Pendley was part of. That, I believe, was the extent of the remedy.
So was there any discussion in there about the ability of, say, the secretary to ratify everything that had been done?
I did not see that in there.
So maybe you have...
Secretary still has all the authority, right?
Right. Usually everything...
Most of the authority is delegated to...
The secretary.
The secretary.
No, who then... Yeah.
He delegates it down.
Yeah, you read all the statutes we mentioned, and usually they reference like the secretarial level, and then that gets delegated down. But there are some things that contemplate the Bureau of Land Management.
Right.
Especially internally.
Like FLTMA.
Right.
But that talks about the secretary too. But that's FLTMA's where the director of BLM was created.
Right. So yeah, I wasn't sure what the status of that was and how extensive it was going to be, but it certainly creates a template, or in my understanding, I think you had read it and said it was a well-reasoned opinion, not one that you would think, not inflammatory by any means.
So two questions then for the solicitor. The solicitor faces the danger. So if he's trying to decide whether or not to take this on, is what?
Just so I'm clear on this one, it's not the Solicitor of the Interior.
General.
It's the Solicitor General, right? The guy that's in charge of all advocacy for the United States in front of the Supreme Court, makes all appellate decisions, even in like the 10th Circuit, the 9th Circuit.
So he has to decide if there's potential damage in not appealing this because of all the other people that could be affected. Even if you may agree, even if you don't like Pendley or whatever, it could affect so many other things that you might have to say, like, you know what, we have to die on this hill.
Yeah, they review all appeals, right? The opportunity every time the United States loses, they look at and they have their sort of
very interesting
processes.
And remember, this appeal will go through the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals as well,
which presently is
right. It's flipped now, I guess.
Ish,
yeah. It used to be the most liberal court, right? Liberal.
I don't think we've ever talked about that every episode.
Had the most judges appointed by Democratic presidents, as opposed to.
But we have recently talked about how more judges on the Ninth Circuit are considered conservative,
right? Because of appointments made during the past.
And then I'm fascinated by the other thing that you noted. Is there a way then? So for basically the secretary to say like, these decisions were okay because I'm stamping them now.
Yeah, that's kind of what that was my first thought.
Right.
It was, well, maybe they can ratify this, and then it sort of cures it.
The question is, though, does it cure it, or would you potentially have to start a lot of the processes over?
You might.
Because, I mean, you know where I'm going, right? I mean,
yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I think it would be a temporary piece.
Until the next judge said, you can't do that.
You can't. Remember the APA? Yeah. So it would probably buy time, but it would alter the template. Then rather than challenging using it as a template, then they use it. They challenge the secretarial.
I'm sure we'll be talking about William Perry Pendley next year. So,
yeah, we might be. Who knows? But it's going to be interesting. I mean, I did read. So I read the opinion on Friday right after it came out.
Send that to me when you get a chance.
Yeah, I will. I'll send it to you tomorrow morning. So I read it, and like it was not inflammatory. It was very well reasoned, and in fact, there was a place, and it was in this was for purposes of standing. It wasn't actually in the on the merits, but for purposes of standing. It cited a Judge Kavanaugh, not a Justice Kavanaugh.
Oh, yeah,
which I thought was a nice touch.
Yeah, and so what's fascinating about this is that there's so much politics involved, but it really wasn't. That's not what it was about at the end of the day. It's just politicians and politics were used as a motivating factor to argue.
This was all about the Vacancy Reform Act. I mean, this was all about the letter and spirit of that law.
But who was the plaintiff?
Yeah. But there are multiple cases. In this particular case,
in this case, you're talking about
the plaintiff was Governor Bullock of Montana.
Yeah,
for sure.
Who's running for
Senate?
Yeah, in a tight race against Senator Daines,
or maybe Secretary of
not Interior.
You don't think?
No chance. No,
just Udall.
Yeah.
Okay. So, anyways, my point being, there's a lot of other things involved in here.
Yeah, I agree. There are other things involved here too, but at the root of it, that's not what the judge is looking at.
No, I understand that.
And when I read this case, that's not. And I've seen other judges that get kind of political. Right?
Yes, sure. All I know is I've never had very good luck in front of Morris.
It was Judge Morris in Montana. Yeah.
It's so much better that it is this guy, though, isn't it? It just doesn't make it that much more entertaining that it is William Perry Pendley. Yeah, because if it was somebody that was less, I
don't have anything against the guy. I don't know.
Entertaining. No, he's just an entertaining caricature, right? He looks like Yosemite Sam.
You don't think he looks like Joe Exotic? I think he looks like Joe Exotic.
You're weird. No, he kind of does.
Yeah. Anyway, we promised an update on kind of a discussion on
probably more than you wanted.
Where it goes from here. Basically, it can go a lot of different places from here.
But it's not going away as we predicted that it would go away months and months ago.
Slowest fizzle.
We're still wrong.
We were wrong.
But we're right now.
Yeah.
But we were wrong when we said it wasn't going to be a big deal for very long.
Lay down your predictor. Appeal or no appeal?
Appeal.
That's what I was going to say, too. I think they appeal.
Win or no win?
No, it's too much.
Oh, do they win the appeal or not? I think Bullock wins the appeal.
I agree.
I think they lose. I think they overturn.
You think the ninth overturns it?
Sure.
Right, you just want to go the other way?
Yes, because I haven't read the opinion. How am I going to have an informed opinion? You know? But it just, yeah, why not?
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll keep everybody posted. Anything else you guys want to talk about? This is pretty late. Should we just make this like a 7-hour podcast?
We could, if you'd like to know about the...
No, we don't want to know about the Paleozoic.
Let's see.
Checking all your notes.
No, let's wrap it up.
You want to wrap it up?
Yep.
All right. Well, if anybody has any feedback on this, let us know. Right? Not on the Pendley part. Yeah, you guess
We don't want to know anything.
We don't want to know. We're done. No, on this forestry issue.
He's from Cheyenne. You knew
I
that,
know.
right?
He went to my high school.
I bet he's haunting your house.
I have his business card on in my desk from when he
That
was
is
at
so
the Pacific
weird.
Legal Foundation.
And he never even left it there. It just showed up.
It just magically showed up. Yeah.
What if he's in your attic?
He spoke right after we did.
Yeah, I have his card too.
Yeah. Probably from the same event, right? You and I were.
I can't believe
You and I were speaking at the same event on different issues.
Yeah.
And he was following us.
Yeah.
Can you
Absolutely right. And if you hadn't told me that that's who it was, I never would have known.
Yeah. This was before he was.
Maybe that's why your dog.
This was when he was still at Pacific Legal.
Maybe that's why your dog was so scared he had to get out of this room.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, what I was going to say. No, my dog was just tired. It's late. It's really late. What I was going to say is, for people listening, if you have any comments or questions or think we're just totally wrong that how we should be addressing this fire issue, don't write us.
This has been the worst podcast we've ever done.
No, seriously, we always appreciate the feedback. We really do. And I know several of you wrote in and asked that we address forest management, and I'm sure we probably didn't cover it the way you wanted us to cover it. We covered it the way we thought we wanted to cover it. So if you want a different take on it, we're happy to do another episode on this at some point, because this forestry issue is not going to go away anytime soon. And frankly, it's going to be my new mission now to like try and get more.
Let's start that book.
Start the education and the enforcement stuff. And
So
my mission now is to reduce that 85% number. I want
There's a
to be part
pre-sale-
of that solution.
Pre-sale on Dave's
remember
book.
that.
I want to be part of that solution.
I'm going to remember that
Okay.
next time Chris and I are up way late at night trying to put that fire out while everybody else went to bed.
Pre-sale on Dave's book. You
We'll go
can
wake
pay
you up.
right now on our website. You can order the book. It'll be done in someday.
All right.
So
Until
much,
that day.
so
though.
much better than American Buffalo.
But until that day comes, and it might come, it might not, but until that day comes, everybody get out there and enjoy the world, right? Because remember, life is about experiences. So go have one.